im se svima, i malima i velikima, i bogatima i siromašnima, i slobodnjacima i robovima, dade žig na njihovu desnu ruku ili na čela njihova, te da nitko ne može ništa kupiti ili prodati.
Pozdrav dragi narode, dobrodošli u još jednu epizodu Slobodni. Sjećamo se prije 2 godine velikih protesta kamiondžija u Kanadi. Nakon što su tražili od njih obavezno cijepljenje i nakon što su već nakon 2 doze tražili i 3. i 4, kamiondžije su se digle i napravili veliki protest. I nakon tog protesta dogodilo se mnogo toga što je obilježilo našu borbu i obilježilo budućnost ne samo građanskih i ljudskih prava, nego i inače zapadne civilizacije. Zašto to tako govorim, vidjet ćete u današnjem razgovoru. Naime, ti događaji, ti protesti su dobili i sudski epilog i danas imam čast razgovarati sa gospodinom koji je sudjelovao u procesu i koji je uspio dobiti jednu veliku bitku. Moj današnji gost zove se Eddie Cornell i dolazi iz Kanade. Welcome, Mr. Cornell, to our show in Croatia.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your interest.
Can you tell to our audience who is Eddie Cornell?
I was a military member for 22 years in the Canadian Armed Forces. I had a couple of careers beyond that once I left the forces. And I've been an activist, basically holding the government to account for the overreaching policies that, they've done over the years. And then when COVID hit, I knew something wasn't right and I had to get involved. And I was involved right from the beginning at speaking out that things didn't add up, which led me to why I'm here today speaking to you.
Great. For start, just to say to our audience, you won some important case on the court. Can you tell us what?
Certainly. So your audience knows that during the trucker convoy, the Freedom Convoy, in February of 2022, it was a peaceful protest that people were well within their rights under our Constitution to protest. There was no violence, no crime, yet the government decided that this was a national emergency and put in what they called the Emergency Act, which is our form of martial law. They also, with that act, targeted 280 Canadians, myself as one of them, and froze all of our assets and bank accounts. And that was implemented on the 14th of February, 2022.
And now you won, and court says that was unconstitutional.
Yeah, that's correct. It was a really big surprise. We put the lawsuit forward while the emergency order was in effect. And it took 2 years to get this done. It was a landmark decision for our country. It shows that our government overstepped their authority and did not act within the law. So it's a massive decision for our country. And it opened the door for many of us, including myself, to personally sue all the individuals that perpetrated this onto the Canadian population. It was spectacular. Canadians have had nothing but bad news for almost 4 years now, and to get a decision of this caliber from a judge in the federal court really gave people hope in this country that not all is lost.
Great. Well, we need to explain to some of our audience who doesn't know what happened 2 years ago, and of course, how you get involved in this.
Certainly. At the beginning of the pandemic, I knew things weren't adding up. What they were telling us, and I'm sure it's the same in other nations and yours around the world, that your government really was using political science versus actual science to get people into line and, with draconian policies that just didn't make sense. So I got involved, and it was difficult. It was an extremely difficult time in this country trying to uncover the truth and find out why they were doing this. And I saw, very similar things happening in all the Western countries around the world. And then suddenly, we felt we weren't getting any traction with our message is being heard. And I heard about a trucker convoy that was starting. And I heard rumors that it was going to take place and go to Ottawa. And it was like a calling for me. I joined the convoy from the east. We had a convoy from the west coast. And, Canada's a very large nation, and thousands of trucks and people came to Ottawa to express their concerns for the vaccine mandates and the lockdowns that our government had perpetrated. And right across the country, our overpasses were filled, our highways were lined with people waving flags and giving support to everyone that was making their way. Not everyone was able to go. So I just knew I had to be part of it. And, with how it began, it was so peaceful, so terrific. I ended up speaking on the center stage the very first day. And, I was there as a veteran, and I knew that I could offer logistical help. So I ended up working behind the scenes with a lot of the other people involved in providing support to all the truckers, for getting food, getting fuel, and just anything that they might need for the whole time during the convoy.
And as I saw, we were covering all of these things, and it was really amazing. And I saw that people supported you. Exactly, citizens of Ottawa were on your side.
They were. You're seeing, over here, the legacy media likes to portray one message, and it was, the message that we were Nazis and white supremacists and we were terrorists and we were, beating people up and tearing masks off their faces and starting buildings on fire and stealing food from the homeless and the food banks. And it was the opposite of that. The food banks, for example, we were donating thousands of pounds of food, and they actually turned us away that they couldn't take any more food into their facilities. Homeless people have never been fed so well. Citizens of Ottawa, for the first time would approach people and, like myself, and say, I've never felt safer in this city. And they are so happy that the trucker convoy was there. It was a breath of fresh air. But there was some naysayers that, threw eggs and screamed obscenities at us. But we tried our best not to engage with those people. We remained peaceful the whole time. And initially, even the Ottawa Police Service was very supportive. And, we're shaking hands and taking pictures with us. And they thought this was just terrific. People were having a great big party, and all they wanted to do was to show up and show their concern of what the government was doing to the citizens of the country. And the government would not engage. Our prime minister, for his own safety, they took him to a secret location for his own protection. Amazingly, at the same time, he caught COVID because he was afraid of grandmothers, grandfathers, mothers, fathers, and children that were armed with barbecues, snow shovels, and bouncy castles.
And that moment when he catch a COVID, but he was vaccinated twice at that moment. How it's possible that he can catch COVID?
Well, that's just it. As we know now, looking backwards, initially when you received your vaccine, it was supposed to protect you 100%. And then the narrative went down and down. It was 95% effective, 80% effective, and it went down the line. And then they finally said, well, you can't, you can transmit COVID and it won't stop you from getting COVID, but, you'll be less sick. And then the narrative went right down, well, you won't go to the hospital if you get your vaccine. And then finally, if you get your vaccine, you won't die. But we know now that people are dying as a result of the vaccine, but they're not talking about it. They don't want you to look over there because, death is something that, has really spiked since the vaccine rollout. And we need to get to the bottom of what's happening. I'm not a scientist, but I know something's definitely wrong, and millions of people around the world do too.
Yeah, there was a joke. It's not time for joking, but there was a joke. But if you die from after you get vaccine, then you get to paradise, not to hell. There was also a Canadian citizen inquiry, and I read conclusions, and I spoke to Dr. Mark Trotsky, who was one of the witnesses there, and all this conclusion telling that there was no science behind any political decision. But let's go back to the moment when they decided to implement this emergency act. When this happened, and how was your feeling? What was happening on the place where you were?
Certainly. What happened was, over the period of the protest, you could see the police that were more, aligning with what people's views were. They were removing those police officers and bringing in police from across the country that were much more militant and much more, hostile towards the citizens. So when they imposed the Emergency Act, the tone changed drastically. And finally, once they had all of the forces in place, I spent a long time in the military, and these guys looked more military than I ever did. And they met the protesters with brutal force. They shot us with rubber bullets, tear gas, beat us with batons, as people saw in the media, run over with horses. Just as an example, some of the veterans, I made a call out called Stand 2 during the protest to bring veterans to Ottawa, and they came by the hundreds. And we acted as a shield between the citizens and the police. The veterans were the first to be beaten, along with citizens shortly after. And a lot of the veterans were taken in the back of paddy wagons in minus 25, minus 30 Celsius weather, taken to a processing center, made to stand in the freezing cold, and processed without charge, no arrest, and dropped off in the middle of nowhere without adequate clothing to protect them from the cold weather, and just dropped off like yesterday's garbage, along with citizens. And, the veterans that were there, we all had our medals on, and they didn't care. They beat people into submission, hitting them with muzzle ends of riot guns, beating with batons, kicking, smashing. It was disgusting that a police force could turn on the citizens who offered zero resistance. Not one punch was thrown by a citizen.
I heard also there was these uniforms without any mark, and these guys or military who was there was talking to different languages. People who were there told me that.
I'd heard that. I saw those police that were in the green uniforms without the markings. I can't really say who they were. I don't know. We've tried. Some say that they were, assembled from different police forces in Quebec, but, I've had no concrete information to find out who these people were. But I can tell you this, they were extremely violent towards the protesters. And, the other police as well. Like when I walked the line with the police, I would look at them straight in the eye, and some looked like they just wanted to break my neck. Others wouldn't look me in the eye. There was a couple that I actually saw that were crying, and they pulled those ones out very quickly. I had a couple that I saw that passed out. They were just, so scared. And it was just the most egregious display of government overreach in my lifetime. I never expected Canada, as a democratic nation, to turn on their citizens that disagreed with their government in this way. And I know that a lot of the people that were there and experienced this, when they see video of what happened, they cry incessantly. It's affected us ever since, and we feel like our country is slowly deteriorating and that it's lost. And I just wanted to be part of helping to restore some hope, because hope is something that's in short supply in this country.
And also I heard some stories and saw some pictures of airplanes, military airplanes with the mark of United Nations very close to this Ottawa city. And some rumor says that these military forces was international UN military forces. Is it true?
There was planes, but were they there for the protest? I can't say. Maybe they were there for regular maintenance. There's no concrete information to say anything other than it was coincidental. I wish we had the information to know one way or the other, but you always keep digging and see what we can find out. But to this point, we can't confirm that was any way involved with the protest. It's something though that we'll continue to look into.
And also we have to say to our audience that this protest was triggered by a mandatory vaccination, but after already people took 2 vaccines, but they need to continue. Am I right?
Well, that's correct. And, most of the truckers were vaccinated. So, these are guys that move freight from point A to point B. They sit in their truck, they take their load, and they drop it off wherever they go. All of a sudden, they're imposing a mandatory vaccine mandate, and they'd had enough. I mean, why did they target this group? So, it got to the attention of regular Canadian citizens and said, hey, wait a minute here. This is wrong. Our government likes to say that they didn't impose, or force you to get a vaccine. But, if you look at some of the video that's appeared with our prime minister, and he basically said, if you want to get on a plane, a train, or sit beside somebody that's vaccinated, he just marginalized those who chose not to get vaccinated and allowed the vaccinated part of society, empowered them to discriminate against people that chose not to do that. And it was really, really scary for a lot of people that chose not to do it, because they weaponized a portion of the population against the other. And, not to say that this was the case, but they did similar things in Nazi Germany, with the Jewish population. They marginalized them, told they were disease spreaders, and they were using the same type of tactics here. And, other places around the world in the same way. So it was really divisive, and people had enough of that vitriol coming from our government that made them look like they were enemies of the state.
I heard him speaking, and he said, I never mandated vaccination. And I think it was in front of court.
Yeah, he did. He contradicts himself on any statement that he makes. He says one thing publicly, and then when they ask him about what he'd said, he goes, oh, I didn't say that. So, we have the footage of all of his lies. It seems that these days, everything that he speaks of is a lie. And how can you trust someone that lies to that degree? And yet, he's not held accountable. Our government is out of touch with reality and what the citizens are trying to bring the attention to. So with other things that are happening in the country, they're shutting down free speech, basically with a new bill called C-63. It's called the Online Harms Bill, which will silence any criticism or anything that they deem to be hateful or hurtful. And you could be put in jail for up to life in prison for saying something that someone doesn't like. And it could be from anyone, and they don't have to tell you who it is. And you can be fined from $20,000 to $70,000 as well. And here's the one thing that I've got to dig into further, but it's also like future crime. So if they think that you're going to say something in the future, they can put you under house arrest and put an ankle bracelet on just in case you may say something.
You want to say that now they are proposing this new act because we was facing of big censorship during all pandemic. Also, we were facing that you had frozen accounts. That's something that nobody can ever imagine, that government can froze your account without legal decision, or froze account to people who helping you, not only you and other who helping you, without court decision. That's very important. And now, as you said, they're offering some new bill. Can you please explain us which kind of bill they are now offering and what can bring us, what can bring us in the future?
Did you want me to talk about the frozen bank accounts first?
Of course.
Okay. My Alma accounts were frozen. 280 Canadians' accounts were frozen. And this would be for the offense of donating as little as $20 to the trucker convoy. I made no electronic transfer to the convoy participants. So I would like to know why my accounts were frozen. Was it because I said something they didn't like? There didn't seem to be, any reason why they targeted certain individuals. And, it's one of those things. You have to imagine that they can literally seize your money. I had no way of buying food. I had no way to put gas in my car. I had no way to pay my bills. And I was trying to make my way home after they brutally assaulted us in Ottawa, yet I had no money to get home. I had no credit cards, no nothing. If it wasn't for the kindness of other people that gave me a few dollars to make it home, I don't know what would have happened. And that happened to 280 of us. Not all of the people that had their accounts frozen were there. In fact, the lawsuit that we've launched holding the government to account for freezing our bank accounts, one of the participants in this lawsuit is a 17-year-old boy who had a joint account with his father and disagreed completely with the trucker protest. He wanted nothing to do with it. He thought it was completely wrong. Yet his was frozen as well. And he found out when he went to deposit his paycheck as a dishwasher for a restaurant in the city that he lived. So without court order, without due process, and without an appeal process, they froze our accounts. We had no way to know that our accounts would ever be unfrozen, or who would we talk to find out how we could appeal. Is that a government that, acts in, accordance with the law? I don't think so. I don't even think North Korea freezes the accounts of their citizens. Maybe somebody could correct me on that, but, I can't seem to find any evidence that they would do that to their own citizens, yet ours chose to do that.
And you said one interesting thing, that with help for other people who gave you some money, I suppose they gave you cash money, that you succeed to get home and eat something. But let's imagine, now they are implementing central bank digital currency, and they want in the future to make cashless society. I think Canada is in front of other countries in the world. What would happen in case that was only central bank digital money in that moment?
Well, exactly. I mean, we have a government that has demonstrated to the world that they'll freeze your account for anything that they deem to be unacceptable to them. Remember when Trudeau stood up in front of the media and said, people are coming to Ottawa, the fringe minority, with unacceptable views. Well, who decides? I guess they do. I thought we had free speech in this country. I would warn anyone in the world that central bank digital currency is probably the worst thing that could happen to any country, because when they deem you to be, a person that they don't really like, they're going to switch off your bank accounts. You go to buy gas, and all of a sudden it's like your cards don't work, and they will do that at will, and it's much easier. The thing that is disturbing to me with having our bank accounts frozen is they shared my personal information along with all the others worldwide, all kinds of different countries, China, you name it. So what if I travel to one of these countries? Am I going to be thrown into a gulag because I'm on a list? I don't know. So, the fear of finding myself in a prison in a foreign nation through no fault of my own is pretty disturbing and alarming. And central bank digital currency is going to be the digital prison for every citizen in the world. You need to speak up and say, this is not what we want. They want it because they want to control each and every one of us. And how do they do that? They control the money, and then they control the food, and they control your movement. So pay attention, because you may not agree with what I say or what I have done. And in a democracy, I think we should be able to disagree. And you have the right to say what you say. And I would protect your right to say something I don't agree with. So if you think this won't affect you because you think you're on the winning team at the moment, think again, because when they're finished with me, they're coming for you.
And they're now proposing new law that will forbid free speech. And they are preparing a really big fines, even jail, lifetime jail.
Yeah, that's correct. It's called Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act. I like to call it Bill Communist 63 because it totally takes away free speech in this country. It is so egregious. I can't even imagine how a government that's out of control with drunk on power could think this is a great idea. They've weaponized speech. So now you have to whisper if this bill comes into effect. You have to whisper to each other quietly and hope somebody doesn't hear you because you may offend somebody. So online, here's what I could say. This sounds extreme. I could say that natural gas burns cleaner than oil. They could turn that into a hate speech. Under this climate revolution that we have here under climate change, that could be interpreted as hate speech. Or I say, I don't like blue hair. Well, I've hurt somebody's feelings who has blue hair. And guess what? I could be fined $20,000 or put in jail for a period of up to life in prison. Or if they think I'm going to say something that they don't like or could harm somebody or offend someone, they could put an ankle bracelet on me and sentence me to house arrest in case I say something in the future. This is like worse than Minority Report, if anyone has ever seen that movie. This is total control of the internet and what people say. It is alarming. And Canada is in big trouble. We are the first in the world in many different ways. You need to pay attention to what's going on here. We need your help. Speak up on our behalf because soon we won't be able to speak out. This country is becoming a communist Marxist nightmare in a very big way, in a big hurry.
Yeah, we noticed that during pandemic, especially Canada and Australia were really similar to some communist countries. And it seems that they are continuing because, as you said, there is a new war in front of us, war for climate changes, against climate changes. But okay, now we have one victory, one small one, but it's still victory and we need a hope. Can you explain us how this proceed was looking like when you pressed the charges and how long it took and final decision?
Sure. When we actually put in the lawsuit for the government imposing the Emergency Act and for the freezing of bank accounts, Justice Mosley, which is the federal court in Canada, made a landmark decision. I'm sure he was under tremendous pressure to get in line with the government narrative, but he made a decision based on actual law and based on our Constitution, and it was tremendous. In the beginning of the trial, he basically said that he would have sided with the government, but when he examined the evidence was overwhelmingly in favor of the government acting beyond their authority. In Canada, in our courts, it's called ultra vires. So what that means is that what I had just said is that they had acted without the authority to do so. It was not a national emergency. So that opened the door for us to countersue the government, which we've done. I'm the lead plaintiff on a new lawsuit. There's 32 defendants, 20 plaintiffs. I'm the lead plaintiff. And it's the Prime Minister on down through the police forces and also the anti-hate network. The anti-hate network in Canada basically was a primary source of information the government used to vilify the citizens that stood up and said something against government policies. So we're very hopeful with this lawsuit, and it's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time to get this in front of the court. We are suing them personally, so we're hoping that they're not able to use government tax dollars to defend themselves. So the people that were targeted that had their bank accounts frozen in this case basically were the low-hanging fruit. We're people that don't have a lot of money. We don't have a lot of influence, and it's difficult for us to defend ourselves. So they chose us, for specific reasons, because these are people that don't come back and, try to hold their government to account for what they've done. But they made a very big mistake, because that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to hold them accountable. And they need to be in a position where they could never do this to another citizen in a free country again. So it's going to be very interesting when this case actually gets to court. I think a lot of evidence that we were not able to see. We had a prior inquiry under Justice Rouleau that basically endorsed that the government acted accordingly, and it was justified for them to put the Emergency Act into place. But that was not a court of law. That was an inquiry. So it had no legal teeth. It was a kangaroo court basically from the beginning. It was a liberal appointed person to oversee the inquiry. So we knew what the outcome would be. But the government likes to refer to that as being the ultimate decision. So, when the actual court decision came out that we won against the government for imposing the emergency order, it was a spectacular win and gave Canadians hope once again that we can hold them to account. And I think our future is looking better. And this isn't the time for people to sit on the couch and say somebody should do something. This is the time that you need to speak up and you need to do something. We can't do it alone. It's going to take all of us standing shoulder to shoulder and saying, this isn't going to happen.
How long it took to get this final decision from the court?
It took over 2 years. We implemented the lawsuit while the Emergency Act was in place. We literally had 8 minutes before the Emergency Act was removed to implement that lawsuit against the government. If we had not made it in that time period before they lifted the emergency order, we wouldn't have been able to sue the government for what they had done. So thankfully, our attorneys were able to scramble along with us and get it done and get it in and just under the wire. And, it took, like I say, almost 2.5 years to get the decision that we did. So it was a nail biter right up to the very end. And Canadians didn't really know that this lawsuit was in effect. It was very quiet. It got no coverage in the media. And, looking back, that's probably the best, because we've had so many disappointments in our country. What if the decision didn't go our way and Canadians, knew about the lawsuit and were pinning their hopes on this? It would have been just another blow to, an already discouraged population. But when the decision came down on the 24th of January of this year, it electrified the country. And thankfully, people responded and it gave renewed hope. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to keep pushing hard.
Can you suggest to our audience who are coming from Canada what they can do with this decision? How can they use it for something that maybe they have suffered during the pandemic?
Yeah, don't be afraid to stand up. It's difficult. I understand. I know how hard it is. Believe me. You need to speak up. You need to do something. You can sue your government. I know it costs money. I get it. But there's crowdfunding things that you can do. But don't let them get away with this. We need to stand together and hold them to the rule of law and not let our government turn our country into a communist Marxist complete dystopian nightmare. And that's what they want. It's incredible that a lot of people still in this country think the government's doing a great job and think that this is okay. I don't know if they're under a hypnotic spell. I don't know what it is, but when they're, like I said in the beginning, when they're finished with all of us that disagree with what's going on, they're coming for you. And it might be too late by then. So wake up and stand up.
But how you can explain that Trudeau winning this election? He won last elections again, and I think that was in the time when it was pandemic, and that's why he is in power still.
Well, that's exactly right. You know, in September of 21, he called another election right in the middle of the pandemic. So his message basically was messages of fear. And he put, you know, all kinds of statements out publicly that just vilified people that didn't agree or didn't get vaccinated. And that's basically how he won the election. He won it with, I think, less than 500 or 5 million. We have a population now of 40 million. So that's really not a substantial victory. And he's going to do it again. He's very well positioned at this point to actually win power again. So we have election that will take place within the next 18 months. So I see right now the government is trying to amend election laws. Possibly they're going to allow voting instead of one day over several days, allow much more mail-in ballots. And this is my personal opinion. I think what he's going to do to solidify a win for himself is he is going to propose just prior to the election that he will have a universal basic income of whatever number of dollars per month and people will sign up to vote so they can get $2,000 a month. Also, I think he'll forgive all the student debt. And that's how he's going to buy this election. And when he gets this election, he's going to implement with brutal, tyrannical force and take us into full-blown Marxist territory.
I have to mention here that there is a guy, everybody heard about him. He's in charge in WEF, Klaus Schwab. And he said, we penetrate the cabinets. And one good example, it's Mr. Trudeau. And we penetrate in the Canadian government. Can you explain us how it's possible that somebody who is not elected from anybody said that he is running some country?
Yeah, you know, Chrystia Freeland is actually on the board of trustees. She's our deputy prime minister. And she's, like I say, the board of trustees with the WEF. And many of the cabinet are members. So where is your loyalty? Is it to our country or to an organization that's unelected? You know, the other factor that we have in Canada is that our Security Intelligence Service, CSIS, has determined that Chinese money and China has had influence in 2 federal elections as well as provincial elections right down to the municipal level. Chinese money has been infiltrating into our country in a massive way. And I'm not saying there's criminality, but I'm saying that this needs to be examined and find out where the money has been going and who's been taking this money. Have they been buying influence? I don't know. But something is wrong. China has a massive footprint into our political system here in this country.
I heard Mr. Trudeau, who is admiring China, he says that China is a kind of country that's really functioning well. And I saw also Mr. Klaus Schwab, who says that China is a way of leading a country. They are the great example. And now you're saying that China money is present in Canada. It seems they are not hiding that they would like to see the Canada as a new China.
It seems that way. You know, Trudeau several years ago in front of a group of people actually said he admires the basic Chinese dictatorship because they can turn their economy around on a dime. Who says that in a free country? I mean, he seems to align himself with many dictators, and so did his father, who was a prime minister many years ago, who had very close relations with many dictators, including Castro. They were very close. You know, they were good friends. And, you know, some people have said that Justin Trudeau looks a lot like Castro. I don't know. I do see the resemblance. So he does admire dictators, and I think he wants to become one. And don't be fooled by his fancy socks and his nice hair. He's not that bright, from what I'm told, but behind the scenes, he's controlled by people like Chrystia Freeland and others who have an agenda. What their agenda is, I don't completely know, but I know it's not to help me or help Canadians. They use all the dystopian phrases like keep Canada safe, keep Canadians safe, we're all in this together. Those are strictly Marxist terms, and they're flooding that information to try to, convince Canadians that they're on their side, but they're, I think, trying to lull us into sleep so that they can have a total takeover.
I also heard him telling us that whatever we learned during pandemic, we will impose in new climate lockdowns, exactly in fight against climate changes. What he means by that?
Yeah, we have a climate cult in this country. Stephen Guilbeault, who is the climate minister in this country, used to be part of Greenpeace and a very radical activist. In fact, he was jailed as an activist for all kinds of anarchy that he'd done while acting in that regard. They're imposing laws under climate change in this country. And like I mentioned earlier, that if you say natural gas burns cleaner than oil, you can actually go to jail for up to 10 years for promoting fossil fuels. And you can go to jail for denying that climate change is not the definition of what they're saying. So, if you have scientific data to say something else, you could actually go to jail for bringing that forward.
That means that it's forbidden to ask questions, logical questions, and we can say scientific debate.
Yeah, they want to silence any dissension or any critics. They are the almighty institution of information. They are the ministry of truth. And if anyone has read the book 1984, the ministry of truth is happening here in Canada now. And we are far down that road. We are the canary in the coal mine for the rest of the world to see. And if you think it can't happen in your country, think again. You need to be active. You need to speak out. I don't know what's going to happen here, but I know I'm not going to ever give up. I will speak up and I will do what I have to do. And if I have to spend the rest of my life because I spoke up in some gulag or prison, that's the way it'll be. I will never, ever stop. I will never act in violence, but I will hold our government to account in any way that I can. I will never shut up. Never.
Yeah, and Croatia is member of European Union, and when Trudeau was visiting European Parliament, there was one Croatian member. He said directly to Trudeau that he is not welcome in Europe because what he done to his citizens during pandemic.
That's true. I was in Washington, D.C. over the past few days and spoke with a number of the European Parliament MPs that were there, and the person you mentioned as well. And Christine Anderson, who spoke out in European Parliament, she was there, and she criticized Trudeau in the House and told him he is not welcome to speak in the European Parliament. When she came to Canada, she met with a couple of the Conservative members of Parliament. They're the ones that are not in power. They're the opposition party. And the leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, made them apologize for having lunch with her and wrote a letter and basically saying that she was a vile human being. They called her a Nazi, called her all kinds of other names. So in our system here at the moment in Canada, we have the Liberal Party, we have the Conservative Party, which is the official opposition, and they're on the same team. They say things that are slightly different, but they are the flip side of the same coin. We also have a third party, the New Democratic Party under Jagmeet Singh, that has enough seats to keep this prime minister and the Liberal Party in power. So he's given his support with his members of parliament to prop up this government who's in minority status. And he has never, ever decided to go against the government on anything. All he had to do was say, this is wrong. We can't do this. But he didn't do that. He's propped up a government that is out of control. And he is, I think, a disgrace. And history won't be kind to him, I know.
Yeah, it's strange because we are facing the same thing in Croatia. We have also this party, some is conservative, some is liberal or social democrat, whatever, but they are same face of the different two faces of one same coin. You were in Washington last few days. There was the International Crisis Summit 5. What was happening there?
Correct. There was a lot of doctors, a lot of politicians, and a lot of activists like myself that were there. And we wanted to bring attention to what happened during COVID and what's happening presently in, the justice systems in our countries that are affected. And, sort of develop lines of communication so that we can get this information and hold our governments around the world to account. Because the world really is in crisis, and this isn't going away. We need to, share our information, share our contacts with each other so that we can network and, hold these people that are just drunk on power to account. So we can never stop. People around the world need to unite and say, listen, this isn't going to happen. This is a democracy. We're not going to fall into a totalitarian nightmare. And it seems in many countries, including yours, governments are trying to do these things. They're trying to silence you. They're trying to, jail dissidents. They're still pushing the COVID narrative with these vaccines that really do nothing from what I've seen except harm people. It's I'm not a scientist, but I look around and I see friends dropping dead. I see people that, I know getting turbo cancers that were fine one day and all of a sudden, bang, they're at stage 4 cancer. And what do we have to do to make it so that they, realize that these vaccines are harming and killing people, but they just seem oblivious, and they're still pushing the narrative to have people get these horrible shots. Think about it. It's if this had been any other vaccine in decades past, 1 or 2 deaths, it would have been off the market. But the deaths are off the chart, but that nobody's saying anything. Like in our country, in Canada, I don't know if it's the same in Croatia, our legacy media is totally captured by the government in power, the liberal government. Every reporter that works for an institution in this country is subsidized by 27,000 Canadian dollars per year. So do you think you would get objective information in any regard? I don't think so.
Well, that's easy. It's corruption, nothing else. Well, we are in front of a super electoral year all around the world. In European Union, in Croatia, in Canada, you said in next 18 months. In United States, important elections. What you predict will happen in the world in this year?
Well, so far this year we've had some tremendous wins, but we haven't won the battle for, the freedom that we're looking for. But you're seeing governments around the world who were totalitarian being defeated, and, the common sense type of revolution, in a sense, is happening in many countries. Down in the States, you've got Donald Trump potentially going to be the next president, and they're doing everything they can to prevent him from being elected again. As well, around the world, they're trying to divert us in many different ways with, the war in Ukraine, what's happening in Israel, what's going on with China and Taiwan. So there's all of these diversions to distract us from, working to hold the governments to account and try to vilify people that are trying to do the right thing and bring our countries back to some sense of normalcy instead of these totalitarian maniacs that want to destroy people's lives and freedom. I think 2024 is going to be a landmark year, and this is the big year, and I'm so thankful that I live in a time where this will be a place in history that decided the fate of the world. I think that we're going to win. It's going to be a long road, but we can't go on like this. And I believe God will be on our side and watch and be on our shoulder, because I think these people, a lot of them are demons, and we know what happens to them.
Thank you, Eddie. Keep going with your fight for freedom, and I think we'll speak again in the future.
Really appreciate it. Thank you for bringing attention to this.
Evo, dragi narode, dakle, Kanada je uvijek bila uzor zapadnog svijeta, demokracije, slobode, vladavine prava. Da vam si neko pitao prije 10 godina i rekao vam dogodit će se to u Kanadi, vjerovatno mu ne bi vjerovalo. Ne bi vjerovao niti ja. Međutim, događa se. Mi smo svjedoci tog vremena, svjedoci smo promjena koje nismo mogli niti zamisliti. Međutim, što kaže narodna poslovica, ako hoda kao patka i glasa se kao patka, onda je patka. Stoga trebamo vidjeti što se događa i povjerovati u to i odlučiti što ćemo učiniti po tom pitanju. Imamo još puno bitki pred nama, a najvažnija je za slobodu govora, za demokraciju, jer bez slobode govora i mišljenja ne bi bilo niti našeg društva. Hvala vam lijepa na pažnji i uskoro se vidimo u sljedećoj epizodi Slobodni.
Nitko vas neće natjerati da se poklonite zvijeri, učinit ćete to svojevoljno, odbacujući vjeru. Bićete laka meta za zvijer, jer se niste podredili vjeri. Ako se ne podredite vjeri, podredit ćete se zvijeri. Toliko ćete se suobličiti sa ovim svijetom, da nećete ni prepoznati da ste u zabludi. Biće to najveća demonska prevara ikada i pravedno zaslužena osuda nad nepokajanim grešnicima.
Gdje su svi oni koji su nas vjerili?